Hello everyone. This video is on measures of central tendency and dispersion. So our first problem says you receive the following test scores. If all tests are worth the same number of points, what is your overall grade? So to find the overall grade, you have to take the average of all of those test scores. So the way that you calculate the average, you are probably familiar with this, but you add them all up. So 75 plus 65 plus 80 plus 91 plus 79. And then you need to divide them all by the number of numbers, which in this case is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in order to divide them all, I'm going to do n parentheses, and then it's automatically going to fill in my first parentheses, and divide the entire thing by 5, and I get an average grade of 78%. So the overall grade is 78%. So mean is a measure of central tendency. So measures of central tendency are just ways to summarize a set of data. So mean, the average, is what we just did. It's equal to the sum of the data values over the total number of data values. So you want to use the mean when there's no outlier, which we're going to talk about in a second. The median is the middle value. So you line them all up in order and then you find the middle value. If there's an even number of data values, so if you don't have like one middle number, then you find the mean of the middle two data values. And you want to use that when there is an outlier. And then finally, the mode is the number that occurs the most. And you just always want to use that if you're trying to figure out which one comes up the most popular. An outlier is a data value that is much greater or less than the other values in this set. So earlier when I said you don't want to use the mean when you have an outlier, the outlier is going to really skew your mean, whereas with the median, it's just another value. So it doesn't really matter if it's like way bigger or way smaller. It's just another value that's bigger or smaller. So the next question says find the mean, median, mode, and outliers of the data set. So one thing that I did want to mention for outliers is that there are like official calculations for determining if something is an outlier, but they're way beyond what you're expected to do in this class. You just want to use your best guess on whether or not it is an outlier or not. So for this one, mean, median, mode, and outliers. Mean is probably going to be one of the easier ones. So let's see, 75 plus 90 plus 90 plus 38 plus 90 plus 105. And that is 6 values. So I'm going to divide it by 6. And it looks like I put 9 instead of 90. Always check your work. Yep, divide by 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And our average is 81.3. 81.3 for our mean. Our median, I'm going to write them in order, so that's going to be 38, 75, 90, 90, 90, and 105. So for this one, our middle number is going to be between 90 and 90, and if you average those out, you're just going to get 90. But if they were different numbers, then I would add them together and divide them by 2. If I do that, I'm going to end up with 90. Our mode is also going to be 90, because there's 3 of those. And then finally, the outlier. So I would say that 38 is definitely an outlier because it's much smaller than 75. And I would say 105 might be an outlier, but if you look at the difference between 75 and 90, that's not so much. Like that's pretty consistent with 90 to 105. So I think that one is okay. So I would say the outlier is 38. So that would be your mean, median, mode, and outliers. All right. The next one says that you realize that you spend 45 minutes on the internet on your phone every day. How does this change your measures of central tendency? So what ends up happening, and you can do the calculations yourself, you can add 45 to each of these. So if I add 45 to 75, I'll just copy and paste that to the 90, to the other 90, to 35, to this 90, there we go, and divide it by 6, I end up with 126.3. 126.3 for my mean. And that is 45 more than 81.3. So, let me go back. What was that number? 126.3. Oops. That is the mean. And what you're going to find is that, think about if I'm adding 45 to each of these and then finding my median, that middle number is also going to be 45 more than the 90 that we got for the previous problem. So I'm going to add 45 to that 90 and get 135. And what you'll find is that when you calculate all of these, you're adding 45 to these 390s, so that's going to be another 135. So all of these values are just going to increase by 45. So if you have a data set and then you add something to all of those numbers, you're going to end up with all of those measures of central tendency just increasing by that value. So that's a rule that you can use in general. And the outlier is also going to be, you're going to add 45 minutes to that as well. All right, this is what I would consider one of the most useful life skills that you can have. It says you need an overall grade of a 90% to get an A in your class. The following are your test grades so far. What do you need on your last test to get an A? So I want it to be at least 90. I want my average to be at least 90. And I have all of the rest of these, and there are 6 total there. So I have 81 plus 75 plus 87 plus 94 plus 78 plus 65, and then plus some other test value that I don't know, which I'm going to call X. And altogether, I've taken 6 tests already, but I'm going to take one more for a total of 7 tests. So this is how I would calculate that. And now I'm going to add all of these up to see what I'm adding to X. So 81 plus 75 plus 87 plus 94 plus 78 plus 65 gives me 480 plus X over 7. And that's going to be equal to 90. So I want to use opposite operations. I can think about this in terms of like the fraction. I always think in terms of parentheses because they are grouped by the fraction. So since I'm dividing the entire right side by 7, I'm going to do the opposite and multiply both sides by 7. 9 times 7 is 63, so 90 times 7 is 630, and that's going to be equal to 480 plus X. I'm going to subtract 480 from both sides, and I end up with something equal to X. Let's figure out what that is. 630 minus 480 is 150. So what this is saying is I need 150% on that last test to get an A. And unfortunately, that is not possible. You might want to do this calculation and see what you need to get a B. That probably is a better goal, more reasonable goal than 150%. But that is how you would set it up. So if you wanted to see if you could get a B, you would just change that 90 to an 80 and then solve that equation. So the opposite of measures of central tendency is measures of dispersion. So it's a way to summarize the degree to which the values in a set of data are dispersed or spread out. And pretty much the only one that we talk about with that is range. So at the Algebra 1 level, you only have to worry about range, and that's just the difference between the biggest and smallest data values. So I have this example. The following are the number of 2-point baskets two players made in a series of basketball games. Which player is more consistent, and which would you rather have on your team? So I'm going to look at the ranges for player 1. So I'm going to call this range 1. And in the third game, they had 12 2-point baskets. And in the fourth game, they only had 2. So the range is going to be 12 minus 2, which is 10. For player 2, I'm going to call that range 2. Or I don't know why I wrote range S. Range 2. There we go. The highest number of baskets is 9. The lowest is 6. So 9 minus 6 is 3. So this first player had a higher maximum value than the second player, but their range is much bigger. They can get 12 or they could get 2. They're not very consistent. So the second player is more consistent. So you would probably rather have them on your team because they are a more consistent player. I think we've already covered enough mean, median, and mode, so I think that we will end this video here. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to your teachers. Remember, we're here to help you, and I hope this helps you with the rest of your lesson.